Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Glow Show. I'm your host, Janelle Marie Carter, and today we have an incredible, inspiring guest with us. She is not just an entrepreneur, but she's a beacon of creativity and resilience. Megan Holly is a dynamic speaker, a branding photographer, which I'm super excited to talk to her about, a confidence coach dedicated to empowering others and integrating in a unique way with a light-hearted approach and a commitment to fostering a supportive community. Welcome, Megan. I'm so excited to meet you and get
Yes.
to talk to you today. So,
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And I know our conversation is going to be fabulous and I can't wait.
I know. And, I was thinking earlier today, some of my favorite relationships are the relationships where I can't remember how exactly we were connected. And I feel like that's just part of our story together. We have not met in person,
Yeah.
but I feel like I've known you forever already just through our conversations that we've had. And so I think, was it Instagram that?
Yeah, I believe so. And we are local. So it's not like we couldn't cross paths in real life, but here we
Yeah.
are, just the social media has brought us together, which I love.
And I'm a big believer that like energy finds energy. So there's a,
Yeah.
a reason that we're having this conversation today. We have tons of really incredible topics to talk to you about. So let's start in the beginning. You are just this creative, brilliant person. And you said that you had this creative gene since the beginning. So tell me a little bit about what sparked your passion and what brought you into this creative space.
Yeah. Well, yes, like you mentioned, I have always just kind of had a flair for creativity and kind of, I like to say, the frivolous side of life. I was just always the kid and still the adult, honestly, that um, loves all the things. I love color and I love texture and I love sparkle and anything that just makes you feel kind of giddy and like a kid is how I've always been. And so when I was young, everything from being a dancer in that form of creativity to loving to color and paint and create, to all the things you could think of, I was
Sure.
just naturally drawn to it. If you wanted to ask me what I want to do on a random day, I'm sure I would have said, let's color, let's do this, and I always
Yeah.
was just that kiddo. And then it's no surprise that as time went on, although there were seasons where it was dulled a little bit just because of the world around me or thinking that I needed to be a certain way or, oh, it's too flashy to want to love all that color and this and that and the sparkle. So there has been seasons where I've kind of stepped back, but
Mhm. Mhm.
overall, it has always been just who I am, literally to the core. And then I've incorporated it into my life as an adult and as an entrepreneur in so many
Sure.
ways as well, which is so fun and so good.
Yeah, and I love that because there's so many people who forget who they were as a kid. And one of the trainings that I do, we talk about discovering and rediscovering your gifts and your purpose. And we do a lot of that work. Like, one of the questions I ask is, what did you do as a kid that made you forget to like eat and pee and like
Yeah.
do all the things, like that you're so just engrossed in. And in that is very telling. I think there's a lot of answers. And same, I was the creative kid as well. I love performing, so it's no surprise that I'm on stage, singing and creating shows. And it's interesting when you look back, like what you were doing. So I love that you were bold and you were able to weave that into your adulthood and your business.
Yeah.
So, but it's not always that easy as we start to get older. And you
Right.
had some challenges that life threw you some curveballs.
Yeah, absolutely. As it does for all. I kind of always say when people are struggling with the parts and sides of life that when we kind of accepted coming into this world, we weren't ever told it was going to be perfect or easy. And so those curveballs are coming, right? And for me, it has been all kinds of different curveballs. And it's been lost at a very young age, losing a parent when I was 10. It was
Mhm.
anxiety from before that, but then that whole experience really clinched it for me and added
Sure.
in a whole
Yeah,
other
I
level.
would. Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah, yeah.
so, when you look back, and this is for everybody, right? When we look back at those curveballs that come, it's just this. mindful moment of saying, okay, I've lost myself, and how do I find where to go next that makes me feel lit up again? Because no matter how hard something is or how off the beaten path we've gone, we can get back to it. I firmly believe that.
Always. I do too. I really do too. That's why I try to remember to say like rediscovering yourself and rediscovering your gifts, because they're not far. You know who you are deep in your core. And, sometimes we do have these things that start to dim our light and start to push us between society and life events. And you and I talked a little before we hit record about anxiety, and such a huge piece that we both share as creatives that I think, is an important topic to talk about. And you do start to like bury these gifts underneath of the layers of that. So, let's dish out this anxiety stuff that we deal with.
Yeah. I love it, because the more we talk about it, the more we heal ourselves, but more importantly, we help others see themselves in us and our stories, hopefully, because so many of us are navigating that type of thing. And if it's not anxiety for somebody, maybe it's something else, right? That is holding that back, whether it's mental health related or not, but either way. And so for me, my anxiety story stems all the way back, like I mentioned, to being a kid. My earliest memories of just being like nervous and just overwhelmed by life really was probably around 6 or 7, just literally feeling like I wasn't going to make it through moments, because if anybody's had a panic attack, you do feel as though that's your last moments, the last, seconds of life. And it can be very overwhelming, especially as a child. I mean, it's still overwhelming as an adult.
For sure. I know. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to think about what my little 6-year-old self would have felt. And
right. And I mean, I remember there's a story, and I did a post on it a while back, and it got a lot of laughs, because I remember sitting, like literally going to the bathroom before going to like brownies with Girl Scouts or whatever it was at the time. And I was telling my mom, like, oh, my arm is numb and I can't feel it, because I'd heard about somebody having a heart attack.
Yeah.
My anxiety just globbed onto that. And because I was nervous about going to brownies, is what my best guess is at this time, because I don't know exactly what I was thinking.
Right. Like what stemmed. Sure.
Right. I told her I had these symptoms and these feelings, and she was just like, oh, baby girl, and we talked me off a ledge, and everything, was fine and all the things. But anyways, all that to say is this is real, right? Anxiety and the feelings that we have so often in life, overwhelm, frustration, anger, they are real. We can't brush them under the rug and just go, oh yeah, it'll be better tomorrow. We have to honor them. And I know that now as an adult, that it's more fruitful, for lack of a better way of saying it, to give it the space it needs, and then figure out, how do I make this happen less? How do I still show up as my best self through it? How do I give myself space when it's too much that I can't, I can't even understand which way to go next? So as a child, it just kind of kept building. I lost my dad at the age of 10. That really put a lot of fear into me, obviously.
Oh, I can't imagine. Yeah.
Then it was like the first time you realize, oh, that can happen to somebody. Like, before that.
Like all of a sudden you're mortal.
Yeah. All of a sudden you're like, oh, that's a real thing. You may have seen it briefly here and there in a movie or heard it talked about, but you've never experienced it, for most people at that age, right? And when you do, typically it's somebody further out in your maybe lineage or much older. And so it may not, it'll impact you, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, like, there's just these things. And that just was the clincher for me. It was, I couldn't quite grasp reality. And my anxiety just, through high school and even into college was probably the hardest battles between the brain, or between the ears, I should say, inside this brain. Because as I got older, it's like I understood it. I always made it through those moments. So it's like I understand what's happening. And I understand that it's short-lived, whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes. But I still didn't know really how to go on and healthily kind of move through it, And
it's still hard, right? Like I think we can give great advice, but when you're in it, it does feel like, and I have a lot of health related anxiety. I had a lot of health stuff when I was younger. I had a couple very traumatic situations. I had cancer in 2011, and it was like out of the blue, like just smacked me in the face. And so I remember the first time I had a panic attack. My son was a baby. He's 26 now, and I was living in Carbondale, and Carbondale is a college town.
Yeah.
And we had this, like the first year baby book. It was like thick, this is long before Google. I'm aging myself.
Yeah.
And I was watching the news, and there was a story about meningitis on campus, and how like a couple kids had been very, very sick. Maybe one had passed away. And I'm like, meningitis, like I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I went through that baby book and I found it. And I remember feeling frozen with fear of what if I get that, or what if this little child that I suddenly am in charge of, I was 20 years old, and like, and my friends still like laugh at me because I would call them and, I'd say like, okay, well, I can move my neck. Like can you move your neck? And because they would say like, well, if you can't look down, it's a symptom of meningitis. And it became almost like a joke with my friends, but it was very serious for me.
Sure. Absolutely.
That frozen feeling of fear.
Yeah.
And so, I love your story about saying like, oh, I heard these symptoms and now I've got them. It reminds me of my very best friend's daughter when she was in second grade. This is kind of a cute story. The school nurse called my friend and she was like, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but Maddie doesn't have kidney disease, right? And she's like, no. She's like, well, she said she needed to go home for the day because of her kidney disease. So she was just trying to, get out of class. But
right.
we got to keep, you hear these, these kids, you hear it.
Yes. And not only that, it's kind of a metaphor for everything. If we're bringing it back to being a mom, being an entrepreneur, when we hear things, we soak it up like a sponge, and then we just assume these are our only realities that they can be. And so if you're going into building a goal or anything else like this, it's the same idea, just a different type of space, right? And so how often are we taking something and just morphing it into something that we just believe without even knowing it? It's what I kind of dial it into, because it's like, whoa, because our brains are that powerful,
Oh, for sure. My husband and I talk, sometimes we laugh about how I'll have like an argument in my head with something or somebody that hasn't actually really happened. And I'll work myself up. Like I'll be mad. And I'm like, wait a minute. That was made up. Like if they say this, then I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to do this. And then I'm so mad at somebody or something, and I'm like, oh, that didn't even happen. So you're right. Our brains are powerful.
They really are.
And it's such a beautiful thing, and if you can't figure out how to balance it, it can be scary. So
yeah.
But let's lean in a little bit to the beautiful part of that. And, you had another curveball, and you went to school, you went to college, you got a career, and suddenly you had a change.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I did all the things, all the things. I got 2 degrees. I started working in a field that I thought, oh, I'll be here forever. I was kind of in education, and I was, then where the curveball happened was when I kind of moved into programming for families and children through a dance program, kind of meshing my two worlds together, my dance background and my education background. And it was really, truly kind of like a dream to me at the time. That was like, oh my gosh, I get to do all the things I love. I get to have the creative side of the dance and the costumes and the things. And I get to lead and guide and be, a kind of a pillar of this community for all these people. And then things just, we know how this happens in life, right? It just changed. Things changed, behind the scenes, things were just going awry, and the rug was pulled out from underneath me. Mm-hmm. And so not only did I find myself looking around going, okay, well, we are a dual income household. We need to pay bills, and I don't know where that's coming from my side of things currently. I was also grieving. And I don't think people talk about that enough, that there's grief in change. There's grief in job loss. There's grief in not seeing a version of ourselves that we thought would be by now.
Oh my gosh. You gave me goosebumps. Yes. Yes.
And all those things were kind of happening simultaneously for me. And I kind of panicked and, like most people, just started jumping on Indeed.com and all these things, just looking for similar jobs in dance programs or, early education, just anywhere that I knew that my resume could sit well with, I was just looking for. And it was my husband who, ironically, is the person who like really looks for kind of the comfort zone, that said, wait, relax, stop for a second, And for him to say that's big because, he was probably thinking about really, what are we doing?
Right. What are we going to do? Right.
Also, what's going to happen? So for him to actually stop the process of me looking for the options and say, hey, let's take a breath for a second. You are really sad right now because what you were doing for the last however many years, 6-ish years at the time, well, longer than that, but like the meat and potatoes of where I was really loving my career. He's like, it's gone. You didn't really get to wrap this up in a bow in which you would always want to do, because I appreciate relationships and people. And so I did get my closure eventually, because I will always, find a way to continue through those kind of things. But all that to say is it was just like, what is happening? So I took a breath. And when I took that breath, which is so important because we don't do that enough sometimes in life, I realized when somebody would pose the question, well, what is it that you're looking to do next? There's a couple answers that I kept kind of coming to. And it was that I didn't want to have other people who didn't get the bigger visions that I had in my head to squash my thoughts and ideas. So that meant that I needed to maybe think about what I could do in my own space, on my own, outside of any type of organization, which also was the most terrifying answer because I had no idea what that meant.
100%. And sometimes those terrifying answers are like the right answer.
Yes.
And I always say that the universe throws, a pebble and then a stone and then a rock and a boulder sometimes when we're not paying attention to that pull. And this sounds like it was your boulder. And I just want to go back and like piggyback a little bit on the grief part, because that, when I said that, gave me goosebumps. Like, I understand so deeply what you mean by that, because I'm, as a singer-songwriter, a 46-year-old singer-songwriter, I had to grieve my dream of being a signed artist and living in Nashville and, being on tour. And I remember walking down the street in Nashville 2 summers ago, we're going on 3 summers ago now, and saying goodbye to it and saying like, this, I really thought this was going to be it. I just ugly cried, in Music Row on the sidewalk in front of like all of the record labels, and out of grief.
Right.
And then I was able, like you said, to step back, process that, take a deep breath and say, the whisper of maybe you're meant for something else. You thought it was this.
Yeah.
And it sucks, doesn't it? When you're like, oh, it's not it. And you do grieve that. So thank you for sharing that with me. I relate so deeply on that.
Yeah. And I think it's important because so often I relate it to the idea that somebody gives you a gift and it's a similar gift to what you maybe have been wishing and hoping for, but it's a different brand or a different color or it's a different, size or whatever it is. And you're kind of going, oh, I'm excited about it. But there's this little piece of you that's kind of going, well, this is how we go about life. And there's things that are going to shape shift and we're not going to exactly know what it's supposed to look like. And we never really will, even when we have big, grand ideas. I am a visionary and I see things that sometimes aren't in existence yet. But even though I have strong ideas of what it's going to look like, whether it's from decorating my space that I have a strong eye or mind's eye on, or it's something in my career or something, whatever it is, it never exactly looks like what my brain thought it was going to be.
Like going on vacation.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I have this picture in my head of what this trip is going to look like when we get there. In August, we're going to Europe to play music. Like, I have this picture in my head of what it's going to be like. And when I get there, it's not going to be like that at all.
Yeah.
But, what's nice is that when you try to remember what you thought it was going to be, sometimes you can't even picture it anymore.
This is true.
Because that reality is just so great.
Absolutely. And so many times, if you really are being honest with yourself, you were just painting a picture of something that you thought it should be. And what it becomes can be better if you let it be, right? No matter what it is, no matter what it looks like, even if it is a little like, oh, there's some things missing that I would have liked being there. But what if we kind of reframed that a little bit and be like, but it's happening in this way. Wow. Look at that. Right. That's exciting in itself.
Yeah. Like letting go of that preconceived idea of what you really thought that success or business or whatever it is, like you said, a relationship looks like, and then being able to step fully into that. I think it's an important piece of that, like give and take. How do you let go a little bit and then, open your mind up to it? So
yes.
So here you are, you're like, okay, the only way I can see is to work for myself and to be an entrepreneur. What happens next? Like, what's the next steps for you? Like,
oh, goodness. It's like an interesting thing to kind of float back to that time. It was actually fall of 2018. And that time was really interesting because I truly had no idea. I went back to thinking, okay, well, what are my other skills? Like, if I don't want to be in a classroom necessarily anymore, then what does that look like? Like, where are you going? And it was just one of those things of allowing ideas that didn't really exist yet for me to kind of come to fruition, because I had such a kind of, I guess, narrow way of thinking of what my career could look like at the time in certain ways, right? And so I started going, okay, well, wait, we've got this photography side that kind of was on the back burner. It was always kind of a hobby all through the years of teaching and programming and all that side of it. And I was like, that's different. That's not something I would be like, sitting in a classroom teaching or doing, like, it was just totally different. So I was like, huh. So at the time, I found a part-time job teaching dance still. So I had something coming in. So I had some income coming in. I could keep that part of me alive that I loved so much. So it was kind of like a beautiful thing while I figured out what this other thing looked like, which what it looked like was at the time was a photography business that kind of did all the things. I was like, okay, well, I'm sharpening up my skills again. I'm getting my camera in hand. I had been self-taught with also doing some workshops and things like that over the years. And it's like, I guess this is what this looks like. I don't know how to get a client. I'm not on social media except for my personal page. How am I even doing this?
Right.
And so really the thing that, and I do believe this was kind of like a divine intervention thing. One thing that was a catalyst for me was taking a chance on this conference that I went to, which was actually in San Diego. And it was called Pays to be Brave. And it was like one of these things where somehow I got in this group, it was like a group that I got a part of, and people were like, oh yeah, we're thinking we're going and we're excited. And we're just like people from like all over the place. And I'm like, okay, yeah. I'm like getting all hyped and like, San Diego sounds great, And so I had no business going to San Diego, by the way, because I had no idea where much income was coming from.
Right. Yeah.
Dance part-time. It's not like I'm, bringing in all this extra money. And I'm like, but I'm doing it. So something was calling to me that like, this is where you need to be. And then the people that were in this group never even ended up I think like only one other girl ended up going. So it was like this really divine thing where people were like, hyping it up. And then I ended up going and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good. So I go there, I get all of this just like beautiful energy and information and speakers and all this coming into my brain. And it was beautiful. And then I ended up doing some photography there for some of the people that were attending,
wow.
which got me into seeing kind of what it could look like. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is different because I was thinking, oh, weddings and kiddos and all the things that you think of when you think of a photographer, which I did do. But this was a whole other niche of it that I was like, branding, marketing, lifestyle, there's something to it. So from that very beginning moment, my eyes were getting opened wider than I ever thought, just from allowing these different avenues to come into my life.
Yes.
And so in the beginning stages, it looked very much like I was doing all of the different things in photography and just building, a referral base and a client base and all of these things. And it was not always easy. There was definitely months when I was like, is this going to make it or not? And I just kind of kept plugging through and getting more brave and putting myself out there into different groups of people and getting a business page on social media is to be able to have more olive branches. And I say this all to remind people, no matter what whether they're an entrepreneur or they're not, but they're looking for growth in something in their life, that don't be afraid to stir the pot a little bit and see what other ingredients, and by ingredients, I mean other places, spaces, people, resources, tools you can find to help yourself see what this looks like. Because never in a million years would I now think that I mainly branched into and niched down into branding and lifestyle photography, that I get on stages and talk to people, coaching them in that, or coaching about confidence, which also stemmed off of working with so many people in front of my camera, seeing them kind of shell away and, you know.
And how you pull it out of them. And
right. So the coaching side and like kind of branched off of that because, again, with the anxiety brained version of me, I would have been like, you are actually crazy. There is no way that I am standing on a stage with a microphone in my hand. I was sweating just thinking about the idea. And I still, to this day, like when I have to speak or when I have to do anything, even when I'm going to a session, something I do all the time, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, this is stretchy and this is making me sweat and making me feel alive, but I am alive and that's a beautiful thing. So let's do this kind of a thing.
I love that.
You know, here we are.
And I have many, many decades of stage experience. And I will tell you that even I, like with all these years of being on stage and having a microphone in my hand, definitely when you're ready to be vulnerable on stage and share your story and share your pieces, you know, that is, me too. Like I still get a little bit. And one of my very, very dear friends in the music industry, and he was my producer for many, many years in my 20s and just my hero. I love him so much. And I called him one day and I said, this is crazy. Why am I so nervous? And he said, honey, nerves and excitement, they're the same like endorphins, right? They're the same hormones. You're releasing a lot of the same. And so I love to share that piece with people who are like, but I'm so nervous to do this. Let's reframe it. You know, you're excited, you know, you are excited. And yeah, vulnerability is key, is to be yourself, to be vulnerable. And I just worked with an amazing group of young high school female leaders this morning. And we talked about how confidence isn't really what we think it is.
Right. Yeah.
It's not your fearlessness.
Yeah.
It's having something to say or share that is so important that it overtakes the fear and you have to say it anyway,
right.
Even if you're shaking in your boots.
Absolutely.
Or in that it's stretchy, like you said, like, well,
yeah,
you know.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting to me because my human development background that has just always stayed with me. It's one of these things where people will say to me all the time, you know, I have purple hair, I'm dancing and doing all these things on my social media. I've gotten on stages. They know this about me. And their perception of me is that I'm bold and that I'm fearless and that I'm unafraid and all whatever words you want to attach to it. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking about the other sides of it, because we are all multifaceted, right? Somebody's perception that they see that's wonderful. That is a part of me. I can be bold and I can feel like I can step into things, but I'm not fearless. I'm fearful, but I still do it, right? And that's where like you said, the confidence kind of piece comes in, where confidence isn't just feeling like you can do anything or do it without fault. I'm always like, oh, there's plenty of times when I'm like, I could have done that different or better or whatever you want to say. I'm not necessarily confident in everything that I deliver, but I'm confident in the fact that I take the fear or the thoughts or the physical feelings of feeling a little sweaty or shaky or whatever it is for each person and saying, this is normal. I'm a human, you know, and I'm going to still do it. Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever run into, there's so many influencers and so many people in the social media platform space. And I followed an influencer for a long time who I was very inspired by. And little by little, I started to realize that I was leaving her presence feeling worse than I did when I got there. And I had to take a hard look at why. And I eventually unfollowed this person. And, it was a little bit sad because she became a friend, but
Sure.
it helped me to realize that part of like my goals is to remain relatable.
Yeah.
Right. So being able to say like what you just said, like it's normal. It's okay.
Yeah.
We all feel, just because you and I are on stages and because we have podcasts and because there's so many women, who think, oh, I could never ever do that. And it's like, but you don't have to have that fearless piece, like you said.
Yeah. And
That relatability.
and I do believe that if you want it enough, like you truly want something, we will all find a way to the other side of it in some way, shape, or form. And
Yes.
an example that just kind of popped up in my life recently was one of my really good friends, lifelong friend. We were talking about kind of, my world that I've stepped into, being content creator, being, on stages, all the things. And her husband was like, you should do that. You have such a great personality for that. And all the things. And she's like, yeah, it's just, I don't know. And he's like, well, it's just your anxiety talking, because she too deals with like plenty of anxiety and worries and stuff. And she goes, you know what though? That's the thing. Megan also has a lot of anxiety about, this and that and the other, but she's doing it. I'm not called to do it. So it's a different story. So when we're sitting there kind of beating ourselves up over maybe not doing something that we see other people doing, we have to ask ourselves, do I really want it? Right. And if I do, then the work can be done to get there. And if you're kind of like, actually, I'm being really honest with myself right now, I just think I want it because I think I like the lifestyle that comes with it, or I like the whatever relationships that, can be built in that industry or whatever. And if you're being really honest, and when she said that, when we were having this phone conversation, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yes. Yeah. She's not called. If you're not called to do it, I mean, like you said, like you can want to,
Right.
and maybe an example, my husband plays guitar. I play like 4 chords. When I met him, I was like, oh, cool, you've got this. He's been playing guitar since he was 5. So he's been my guitar player for nearly 20 years now. And once in a while, I'll say, I wish I could like just pick up the guitar and like play, rhythm while you play lead. And he said, he's like, you can, you know how to do it. You can do it. And then I'm like, I don't think that's my lane though. Like, I don't think that's what I wanted. I would like to be able to, but I'm not willing to put the hours and hours and like build up the calluses. And I have other work that calls me more.
Yep.
And so it's sort of like just because you can doesn't mean you have to or should.
Well, I love that example because it is one of those things where I think we really have to just get more honest with ourselves in this life. I think so many times we have so much swirling around us, especially in the age that we live in right now. There is so much influence, literally. I mean, we have people whose jobs are influencers. That's the word. And I have no problem with that. I think it's a great thing. But that being said, when we are feeling called or not called to, or maybe we're in a little space of wishy-washy or we're not sure where we're supposed to go, the more honest we get with ourselves, the better we can understand what really we should be putting our time, attention, efforts, finances, whatever to.
Yes.
Basically,
And I love that because something that I ask myself and my clients often is, how can I serve? How can you serve? Like, here are your gifts. Where's the need? How can we combine them? And when you can sit down and say, does this serve myself or the people around me at the best of my ability? For me, writing lyrics does playing, acoustic guitar on 2 songs, maybe not.
Right.
Much as I would love to. And I've asked him, can I just strap it on and stand there? He's like, oh my God, no. You cannot do that. I'm like, oh. He's like, you're not going to be a poser. Well, it's so cool. He's like,
come on.
No. So yeah, but I love that you have so much insight and so many gifts to give. It's really it's beautiful to see. And so what are you doing like now? Like you're coaching, you're speaking, what's lighting your fire right now?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I Oh, from a professional side of things, yes, I'm coaching and speaking and out there in the world, and I still hold space for my photography clients as well.
Yeah.
And, because I just love being one-on-one or in a small group, if it's a small business of people, helping the thing that they enjoy doing, they do it well, they thrive in, and they're making an impact in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I love bringing that to life. So, and
Yeah.
I've been just very blessed at this point in my career where I am a kind of a creative, helper, healer type person. And those are a lot of the people that I work with. I work with artists and jewelry makers and singers and all like Reiki and yoga instructors and just people who are kind of in that world of creating, helping, healing, making.
Yeah. I love that.
And
Yes.
so that is kind of where I spend my time, working with them behind the camera, coaching them from the confidence side of things, figuring out where they are just having blocks and what they are wanting to work towards. And then the speaking is such a fun thing for me because sometimes it looks like the form of a workshop that I hold with maybe somebody else local, that we're going together and joining forces in communities where we put together, our united front, and we kind of bring people together and we help. And that's what really lights me up. From a more personal standpoint, where I'm spending time that's lighting me up right now is being a lifelong dancer.
Mm-hmm.
I was missing being the student. I had not been a student since, gosh, I maybe had taken a couple teacher classes back in the day when I was heavily, into choreographing and all that. But I had not really been the student since probably, if I'm being honest, I was 20 years old.
Okay.
And so half of my life ago. And I have taken myself back into dance classes. And
I love that.
yes.
So I too danced from kindergarten until I was 16.
I love it.
Back when I danced, the competition wasn't really a thing. Like we had recital, maybe one or two a year, and that was that. We didn't compete. And so I've recently joined a dance class like through our local YMCA, which is just once a week, and I'm like, oh, I wish it was every day. Like, yeah. I love that that you're, because I always say, like, always the student, always the teacher, right? Like you're always learning so that you can push out and give. And I want to dance with you. I want you to teach me how to like be a better dancer, because I've forgotten everything. Like, well,
you do. I mean, the statement, if you don't use it, you lose it, is real for a reason, and it applies to anything in life. Our muscles, our memory.
I went into that. It's like I've had so many years of ballet and jazz, and then I was like, this is ridiculous.
What's happening?
I can't figure this. My feet won't do it.
Yes.
My feet are on the wrong legs or something.
It's so interesting. And, for me, like from what I do as a profession and as a business, I was already keeping that alive by helping people pose and feel natural in their bodies. And I would have mid-session dance parties with people. And it's a part of me and my brand. If you go on my Instagram, you see me dancing on there. And I know we're in a world where that's kind of everywhere, but this is like my own version of that, right?
Yeah, this is moving from here. I love,
right? And so, but what it's done for me, and I really only started getting back into classes in January, and as we're recording this, it's March, and so it hasn't been that long, but what it's done is tapped into that little girl that was wanting to be creative in all the different ways, and she wanted to have these outlets, and she didn't want to be told she was too dramatic, because what does that even mean? Let me just be me, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
isn't it cool? Like, yeah.
It's just such a cool thing. So it's letting that version of me out again, but it's also then helping me be, just a better helper in my world and how I help others too, because it's like refreshing your memory of how to learn and tap into all those little dusty cobwebs and stuff like that. And I'm such a big proponent on what movement and singing too, from your perspective, what it does for you. I cannot sing for the life of me. Nobody wants to hear it. It's very terrifying. And that's okay. I'm not digging or being mean to myself. It's just my truth. But those things let out those stuck energies and the stuff when you are feeling nervous or unconfident, if that's even a word, let it out in movement or sound or something.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I can't tell you how many days, where I'm had like a rough day or had even sometimes because music is my job. So like with any job, there's days where we're like, oh my gosh, like it's going to be the longest
Yes.
thing we're going to play. We are in environments where it could be loud. There can be a lot of alcohol consumption. That can be a little wild sometimes. And, truthfully, as outgoing as I am, I do have a very shy side to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like my quiet little house, like I like my quiet little fireplace, and I am a little bit introverted. So, but there's never ever once been a time where I've left the stage and thought I feel worse. It's like, oh, I feel so much better now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so healing.
It is.
Um, I think it's really important to point something out as we've been chatting. Especially, it's a neat story that we don't really know each other that well, but have so much connection. Something that I love to be sure that I portray is that connection versus competition is so huge. So you and I do very similar things and it's different realms, but the same lanes. It would be very, very easy for one of us to say, like, that's my competition, but the connection piece. And for me to say to a client of mine, I know the perfect person for you to work with on anything that you offer or vice versa. There is space and room for all of us. And
Yes.
it's truly, I know like helping each other rise is such a popular quote, but this is what it means.
Yes.
This is what it means. Highlighting, showing up
3,000.
others. And so I just, so thank you for sharing, your life and your story with me and our viewers.
Yeah.
I'm
we
just
all are here just doing our thing, and we all excel in different ways, shapes, forms. And when I say, oh, this person's going to be a great fit for somebody else, there's a beauty in that, right?
Yeah.
We can't do it all. We can't help all the people,
I don't want to. I don't want to do it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I know other people like you, for instance, it's like, this is great. Like, hey, check this out. Go have a conversation. It's a beautiful thing. And
It really is.
even early on, it was evident to me that the more that you just spread the love and share the community, kind of pull up the seat for everybody, the more abundance that comes to all of us. And we can hold hands and frolic into the sunset much faster.
Yeah. 100%. Yes. Well, and with music, I always have music so parallel to personal professional development, like you and I both do. And I always say, first of all, I don't want to play the same venue every single night, 7 nights a week, and they don't want me there that often either.
Right.
We burn out, everybody's going to be tired of you. So I happily in the music industry say, hey, this is a great venue. You should check it out or things like that. And it just, for me, it comes naturally. I don't know. I don't fully understand the competitive part of, maybe it comes from a little bit of insecurity, but this is a perfect example, listeners, viewers, ladies, of what it looks like to come together, share ideas, and be really, truthful about who we are and what we can offer and how we can serve.
Yes.
So, yes. So tell us how we can find you, because everyone's going to love you and want to know.
Aw. Well, I spend most of my time on Instagram, and you can find me on Facebook as well. They're kind of the two spaces and places where you'll find any of my kind of ooey gooey, loving on you content. My handle is Megan Holly Creates. And it's just really where I like to hang out. I am always on my stories. I always say this, but I have the best conversations in my DMs. I share my little magic hours every day where there's little sunbeams and rainbows and all of that. And really, it's just a space for community and connection. Even if I never work with somebody or never meet them in real life, just having a bunch of beautiful people who appreciate the same things in life, whether it's a good piece of music or a little sunbeam popping in at the end of the day. That's what my space is about. So would love to say hello and just hang out with anybody and everybody.
Megan Holly Creates, and we'll link that to make sure that you can. So go check all of Megan's stuff out, and you never know, you might see us dancing on a stage somewhere sometime soon. Yes. Who knows?
I'm in.
And I'll need you to teach me the moves.
I got you.
But thank you so much for your
Yes.
time and your knowledge and your story. I appreciate you. And go follow Megan, check her out. And thank you for tuning in to the Glow Show. I'm Janelle. This is Megan, and we will hopefully see you somewhere together soon. Take care, everybody.